back to the channel. Today we're going to be working on fixing the odometer gear within my 944. My mileage has been stuck for about a year now, and I noticed that because I keep a journal of all the repairs that I do, since I do all of the repairs on this car. So this is pretty common, so I wanted to document it. This job's pretty straightforward. You don't need a ton of tools for it. I just use a Phillips head, flathead, grab something to put all the bolts that I remove in the interior so I don't lose anything. And then I think you need a 24 millimeter socket for your steering wheel. Be sure to mark your steering wheel so that you can put it back on straight so that your blinkers and everything will auto cancel at the right time. And nothing's more annoying than a crooked steering wheel. Now for this, I followed the Clark's Garage instructions on how to remove this and repair it. I took a peek at it so I knew what size socket to use to get the steering wheel off to minimize the trips back and forth to the toolbox. But again, it's 24 millimeter. I'll be sure to link those instructions below in the description. Here there's 8 Phillips head screws you need to take out. One of mine is missing, but there's 3 in the vent section, and there are 5 around the gauges, 3 up top and 2 on either side of the clamshell. Carefully lift up on the bottom of the gauge surround just to pop it up over the steering column. From here there's just 4 Phillips head screws holding in the cluster, so I remove all those. Now here I just want to stress you need to be very careful because of the blue ribbon circuitry in the back of this is very fragile, and also the clips holding on all the electrical connectors can become really brittle. I noticed one of mine in the rear was broken. This has been a part before, I noticed. The previous owner had installed better gauge lighting and it must have gotten broken here. There's just one broken clip on one of the electrical connectors on the right side, but it seemed to hold in place and everything works correctly, so I'm not too worried about it. At this point I have it down on the bench with some cardboard underneath it just to prevent anything from happening to the face of the cluster. I think there's about 8 of these Phillips heads holding the cluster, 2 halves of the cluster together. So remove all those carefully. Again, all of this is super fragile. It's over 30 years old, so just be mindful that you don't break anything behind here, because I can't imagine it's very easy to find parts for these. So don't do what I did and turn it upside down and dump it over. Just be a little bit more careful and learn from my mistakes. After a quick inspection, I opted to put the 2 halves together to basically protect the front of the gauge cluster from getting damaged while I pulled the speedometer out. This is held in by 4 smaller flathead screws, so you can see I'm taking them all out here, and my poor camera angle hides the fact that I am removing it, but as you can see at the bottom here, I was able to get it out with a little finagling. Again, be super careful. Everything in here is very fragile and very brittle. if you look here, you'll see this yellow gear that is supposed to be white. My camera had a really hard time focusing on these little parts, but that is the broken gear. There's a couple teeth missing, and as you will see in a little bit, it's pretty much disintegrating. When I pull it off, it completely falls apart. And this is what's causing my odometer to stop counting miles, which I want to fix, mostly because when I put the new motor in, I want to know like the break-in period. I want to be able to compute things like gas mileage and just generally know how much I drive the vehicle. Once you pop off the needle, which again, be careful, take your time because you do not want to break or bend the needle. It's super easy to do so. There's two bolts holding the speedometer face on, so just remove those with a small jeweler's screwdriver. I noticed that none of my other screwdrivers fit those, so after a few trips back and forth from the toolbox, I found the right size. After that's done, there's 4 bolts holding the 2 halves of the speedometer together. Now once you get this apart, you will see 3 sets of gears. So you start with the one furthest away from the one you're replacing, which is held in by a little pin. You just push the pin out, pull that first gear out, and then the last 2 are held on by C-clips. These are tiny, so be very, very careful not to put too much pressure on the clips or on the speedometer, as that plastic is pretty fragile. And just a word of advice, just be careful. These are extremely hard to find if you drop them on the ground. You can ask me how I know in a little bit. So just take your time, get them off slowly, and be sure to keep track of them. Once they're off, pulling off the actual gears is super easy. You can see them doing that here, and you'll get a peek at how bad that last odometer gear is. It's weird how it's even a different color than the rest of them. Here you can just see the difference in the new gear compared to the old gear, and you can get a better look at those 2 little teeth that are missing from it where it was stuck. After a quick test fit, I put a little bit of dielectric grease within the holes of each of the gear, just a tiny bit to keep them from binding up. I noticed a little bit of corrosion on the pin of the gear that had broken, so wanted to make sure they all spin freely. And then I just go back and reassemble everything the way it came off and start to reinstall the tiny C-clips. Don't do what I do here and use vice grips. I was trying to make sure I didn't break the plastic, and I sent this one flying.
Bruh.
2 hours later.
Searched around the floor with the magnet and was able to find the clip, luckily. So after that, just threw everything back together. Quick look at all the gears replaced and put back to where they are supposed to be. Here I'm just putting the two halves together, holding it like a hamburger and showing you that the worm gear is engaging with the new odometer gear that we replaced. After that, just put the 4 screws back in that hold the two halves of the speedo together. One quick note, I'm putting the speedometer needle back on. Again, be very careful with it as it bends super easy, but you also want to make sure that you put it in the right orientation. You can't have it off. As a matter of fact, now that I'm watching this, it looks like it might be off by a spline or two. So I might be taking this back apart off camera and fixing that because those little things drive me crazy. Got the gauges all back together now without breaking anything, which I'm extremely proud of, and now we just need to reinstall it in the car and make sure everything works. Start the car up, make sure that the gauges turn on. Unfortunately, I will not have time to take it for a drive today. Thanks y'all for watching. I will be sure to post all the links of the products and the instructions I used to complete this, and hopefully it'll help you fix your 944 odometer gear. Have a good one. Bye.